Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to learn more about yourself, then do we have the Walking Each Other Home show for you. Today I'll be talking with Mirabai Bush, spiritual teacher, best-selling author, and co-author along with Ram Dass of several very important books, including one of the most beautiful and perhaps most important books I've ever read, and a new all-time favorite, Walking Each Other Home. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about conversations on love and dying and what it means for you. That plus we'll talk about Hanuman the kitty, the tiger of Kuomoan Hills. Gotcha. Grist for the mill, gospel music in New Orleans, a daughter in Goodnight Moon, Meng and meditation, being wildly, dangerously free, oh buoy, oh buoy, oh boy, Jackson Brown and the Long Way Around, a wandering Jew and a hungry ghost, and why in the world you don't want to be carried away by a minivan.
Now you've told all the good parts of the book.
Woohoo! So welcome to the show, Mirabai. Are you ready to shine?
I am.
It really is such a beautiful, beautiful book. Before we dive right into things, how'd you first meet Ram Dass, who's the co-author on this book?
We met in Bodh Gaya, India, in 1970. Mm-hmm. We had both shown up for the first Buddhist meditation course to be taught in Bodh Gaya for Westerners. We were called Westerners. I had never met him before. I'd heard about him a few days before the course, but I hadn't ever heard about him. I'd been a PhD student in literature and just had no reason to know who he was. But I met him there, and there were about, 75 of us who had all in our different ways, mostly from Europe and the United States, found our way to Bodh Gaya, to this course. It was taught by a Buddhist teacher named S.N. Goenka, Burmese Buddhist. It was the first course he'd ever taught for Westerners, and none of us really knew what we were getting into. I had never meditated. I had never sat down and crossed my legs. Closest I got was when Allen Ginsberg chanted Om, trying to close down the Pentagon. So during the Vietnam War. So not having any expectations at all, I found myself in this course that started at 8 in the morning or 6 in the morning, I forget, and went until 10 o'clock at night, and we meditated in silence that whole time. I mean, Goenka gave us incredible instruction, and at night there was a little talk about what was going on, the nature of our minds. But it was radical, as you can imagine, 10 days in silence after talking nonstop as a literature graduate student. And at the end of it, I felt like for the first time I had begun to see how things really are. And so there was Ram Dass, and we had talks together, and then we all loved it so much that we asked Goenka if we could stay for another course, and we did. And I think we stayed for 4 or 5 courses. We were there a couple of months in this monastery. And when we left, Ram Dass was going to Delhi to do an all-night chant with a Hindu teacher named Swami Muktananda. And he invited a group of us to go with him. So there were about 17 or 18 of us. We chartered a bus and we went to Delhi. But on the way to Delhi, we went through the town of Allahabad, where there had been a Kumbh Mela, a great gathering of yogis and saints. And we wanted just to see the town. And as we were pulling through the town, Ram Dass's guru, who he had just written about in Be Here Now, we had the first copy, was by the side of the road. And we pulled over the bus, and Ram Dass had written and be here now about how you could never find him and you shouldn't look for him. Um, and there he was. And we pulled over, and it was extraordinary. He was extraordinary. He was the embodiment of everything I had a tiny glimpse of in meditation.
And for those
And
who aren't familiar, and we've had on Krishna Das, Larry Brilliant, many others who have sat with him, we're talking Neem Karoli Baba, affectionately known as Maharaji.
Krishna Das was on the bus also. And you know, I had never encountered any such being in my life, and it changed my whole understanding of what the possibilities of being human are. And so I thought I was going to be in India for 2 weeks, and I stayed for 2 years. And Ram Dass and I were really bonded, of course. We all were who were there together. But we were really bonded through that. And then over the next 45 years, we did many things together, culminating in this, the last journey.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to dive into this last, I'm going to put that in quotes, last journey. But before we do that, and you talk about in the book, you wanted anything but a guru. You were not seeking a guru. But when you met Maharaji, you said it completely changed what you understood as the possibilities of being human. What does that mean?
I just had a much smaller sense of what we can know and who we can be, how expanded our possibilities could be. I just felt that it's hard to talk about because being with him, the experience wasn't really rational. And we used to say, sitting in front of him, we'd sit on the ground and he'd sit on this wooden bench, and we'd talk a little bit, but not that much. But we used to say that it was kind of like having your cells rearranged as you sat there. Um, it it just gave me the sense that life could be much bigger and fuller than I ever imagined, and that one could lead a life guided by one's deepest values, deepest principles, in a way that I had left the States in the first place because it was during the Vietnam War, and I was also very involved in social justice work and civil rights work, and the world seemed really, the world that we lived in seemed really insane at the time. There didn't seem to be, there was the whole war machine, but then the secular world was very materialistic from after the Second World War and going into those years. There didn't seem to be any other way that seemed like a sane, compassionate way to live a life. And that's really what I was looking for. And he just opened up the possibilities of being able to listen deeply within and without, and then to create a life that was in line with those principles.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before we're going to do one more thing, and we're going to dive straight into the book, but this is fascinating to me. You said when you started sitting that you learned I was not only the mind, not only my body, I was those, but I was also awareness.
Yeah. I had so identified with my mind, as you can imagine. In graduate school, I read hundreds of books. I was in literature. And and I was in a PhD track. So I was using my rational mind to, uh, critique everything that I read. And it was really all about the rational mind. When I began to look at my mind, and it took some time. We were there a couple of months and of sitting all day, every day. But sometimes some people have this awakening, like in the first 5 minutes they sit down and start meditating, that you see that as you follow the instruction to watch thoughts and emotions arise in your mind and go, you realize you begin to ask, what is it that is noticing? What is watching those thoughts and emotions? You realize that there is not so much a part of your mind, but a part of you that is awareness separate from, integrated with, but your thinking mind and your body.
What was your first experience? And this is a book about life and death, and that's why to me I can't think of a more important topic and a topic that's more brushed under the carpet. Actually, I wasn't planning on going there, but my wife and I recently experienced a miscarriage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's appreciative. It brings home, this is a doorway, and this is temporary, and this is far.
Yes.
To me, it really is. This is the dream world in our infinite existence.
Yes. Yes.
What was your first experience of death in India? I believe it was Sayagi Ubakin, if I get that right. What did Ram Dass share with you about breathing in and out in death?
Well, first I want to say I really am sorry, and uh, that my mother had 3 miscarriages before she had me. She had had 1 child, and then she had 3 miscarriages. And so I was really treasured when I arrived, because she realized what you're saying, that it's brief, we don't know how long it's going to be. It's a miracle that we're here at all.
Yeah.
And I received that message from her. So if your child has given you that, which it sounds like he or she has, that's a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah, we envision her as saying, "Phew, not yet," and circling
Yeah.
the airport.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
circling. But boy, does it change you. In a sense, there's a hole that probably will always be there. That's, you can miss someone, and I can't even imagine what my wife has
Yeah.
gone through, having somebody living, a
Yeah.
being inside of her. But at the same time, it shifts your perception on everything, your appreciation, and it challenges you. All death does, if you would look at it and lean into it, it challenges you to start asking the big picture questions about all of this.
Yes. 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 And as you know, that's exactly what we wrote about. Yeah.
So
Uh,
thank you. And yes, we
mm.
will appreciate when she comes down and the time is right. We will be like, where have you been?
So you asked about, what did you ask about?
First death experience in India, and with Ram Dass and yourself, with Sayagi, and what
Okay.
Ram Dass shared about breathing in and out in death.
Hmm. When we were in that course, that series of courses, um, the a teacher of our teacher, whose name was Uba Kin, died, and Goenka had been talking about him a lot, as particularly Asian teachers often do, honoring their lineage.
Yeah.
And so we felt close to him, even though, of course, we had never met him. And he died, and so Goenka announced that to us, and it was a unexpected death. He died in surgery, and so it brought up, for the first time of us all being together, um, death. Death came into the room, and although we were in silence during these courses, there were like 3 days or something uh, in between courses, when we would talk, of course, nonstop. And we talked about how just sitting there day after day, breathing in and breathing out, and watching the mind, thoughts, emotions arising and falling away, you begin to understand that how it is all impermanent. It's all of it. It's all arising and changing and disappearing eventually. And so I think it was another teacher of ours, Maninderji, who said that each in-breath is life, and each out-breath is death. And if you begin to appreciate it that way, then when our own full death comes, feel it much more as a natural unfolding.
You've also made more of a connection. You've developed a relationship with death.
Yeah. I mean, I, like all of us, hadn't spent a lot of time talking about it. You know, when someone we love dies, we more often talk about that person and our memories, and we grieve. But death itself, you know, in the Western culture in particular, it's talking about death is considered everything from bad manners to superstition, you know. And so there aren't many opportunities. I've really seen this now while I've been doing readings of the book, that at first I thought, well, what shall I talk about? But it turns out if I just do some passages from the book, everybody wants to talk and to talk about death. So yeah, we hadn't talked that much about it. Ram Dass, of course, being more of a well-known spiritual teacher and having written so many books, had written and talked about it. But talking between ourselves, between best friends, about what it is we really know and what we don't know, as honestly as we could, was precious. And I want to say that working on this book for 2 years got me so much closer. Of course, I had to think about it all the time. And it really changed me. I didn't have a lot of big fear, but whatever I had has fallen away in big part just from being close to it, talking about it, looking at my own fears so I could be honest about that. And so I really recommend, in whatever way works for you, you know, reading this book is one way, but also talking with your friends and bringing it, just allowing yourself to think about death pretty regularly will really help you. It'll help you see what it is you're afraid of. If you may not even think you are, but there's stuff there. And once that falls away, you can be so much more present in life. I mean, we don't want to die, but we're going to. And once you get that, then you're free to live in these precious few days that we have on this planet, you know?
I've often talked about, I wish we came here like a loaf of bread with an expiration date marked on our foreheads.
Yeah.
We would live completely differently. So you talk about the fear falling away. What does that mean to you? And I want to talk about leaning. I call it leaning into fear. I believe Ram Dass in the book called it snuggling up with fear, or getting as close as you can to what scares you.
Yeah. Well, leaning in is a controversial phrase these days, you know.
Oh my.
So
completely different topic.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's just that getting close to it in the sense of just not keeping it out there, telling yourself, I don't have to think about it now, I'm young, you know, I've got a lot of time to go, thinking about it, we don't know when it's going to come anyhow, thinking about it is really depressing, all of that, you know, to just like relax, you know, exhale, just see what comes up when you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to think about death. And just see what arises. There's stuff in there that is really good to let go of, so that you can, anything that keeps you from being fully in the moment, being fully present, loving, caring, smart, is you want to get rid of it. And so there's an app now called We Croak that it's gotten a little more expanded, but their their commitment is to. They read somewhere that there's a Burmese, I think, saying that you should think about death 5 times a day in order to live a full life. That seems like a lot, but so 5 times a day you can get a quote from somebody about dying on your phone. It looks a little bit like they may have run out of the direct dying quotes because they've started expanding their sense of dying, but it does bring it. It brings to us the reminder that making death present when we're not in the middle of somebody dying is helpful for our spiritual health.
There's a city in India, and I'm blurring the line between who wrote what at this part of the book, so
Yeah.
please forgive me. A city in India where people go to face death and to pass away. And was it yourself or Ram Dass who visited there?
We both did, and we both talk about it in the book. Yeah,
So
Varanasi, or the old name was Banaras. Yeah.
yes, yes. And so in Banaras, at first, you perhaps yourself and Ram Dass are looking around with kind of a Western superiority. Superiority. We're healthy. We're going to be around for a long time. And then you realized it's quite the reverse, that they're actually facing the experience and truly living and leaning into that.
Yeah. Ram Dass's story about the first time he went there was really great. He went as kind of an American tourist, he's fairly professor of psychology at Harvard, not hadn't really opened up spiritually yet, and so he went to it was then Banaras, and it is a place where Hindus go to die. Not everyone, but it's an auspicious thing to do. If you die in Banaras, it's understood that you will not be reborn. You'll be, and the Ganges River runs through the middle of it, and along the side of the river, that's the holiest river, and along the side of the river are what are called burning ghats. So it's like big fires where bodies are burned, and so along the road you often see very poor people just who've gotten themselves somehow to Benares, sitting there wrapped maybe in one cloth, kind of waiting to die, and begging. And for Westerners, often that's a very hard thing to see. And so Ram Dass walked through the city the first time, and he was just thinking, this is outrageous. Why don't they do something about these people? And I hadn't heard this till we wrote the book together. He went back to his hotel room. He was so freaked out by it. He got under the bed.
Not proverbially, literally.
Literally under the bed. It's like something our Samoyed puppy would do if she heard big noises, So, and then he was with Maharaji and so on, and understood more about what it is to die in an auspicious way, where you have surrendered to the sacred, and how more about how death is understood in India, and all bodies are burned and so on. And he went back to Benares and saw that. And as he walked through the city that time, he, instead of feeling superior and feeling like something should be done, he felt that, people were looking at him with, I think he said, eyes of pity, because he was lost spiritually. They knew what they were doing. They were here in the most perfect place to die. He was wandering around, not knowing where he was going or what to do with his life. So he saw that as kind of a reversal from a very materialistic way of being to spiritual in view.
Putting priorities in order.
Mm.
speaking about reversal, you and I shared a very different but similar experience, I believe, which is you say there's a time when death comes knocking and it's wrong and useless to resist. But this was not that time. I had one of my near-death experiences where I stopped breathing, started to go away, chose to come back, and for the next hour until Flight for Life got there, I had to mindfully breathe. Each
Ah,
breath was a conscious choice. And had I not made the choice, I wouldn't still be here, at least not in this form.
hmm
You had something similar.
I did. I took a drug that made my heart race and made me feel like, and was racing so much it made me feel like it was over. Um, and I later talked to some medical folks who said, "Yeah, it could have been." Uh, and so I went through in my mind, "Am I ready?" And this is years ago, in the '80s. And I did my kind of inventory, and I realized, yeah, I could let go. I could let go of my work and my friends and my family, and um, but I was a mother of a, I don't know, 7-year-old, and I when he came into my mind, I realized I can't go. I can't go. I There's more work for me to do here as a mother. Um, and that's when I started focusing, what can I do to stay alive? And I began doing like just the basic practice of watching my breath, just like you said, each breath. And, when you're in a distracted mind on an ordinary day and your mind is full of thoughts and, opinions and to do lists, and it's all over the place, it's very hard to follow your breath. But in this case, I had only one thing to do, and that was to stay alive. And I realized that um, the best thing to do would be to breathe consciously, because if I was going to die, that would be a peaceful way to go, most peaceful. And if I was going to live, this would be the thing that would most likely keep me alive, keeping my breath in and out. And as it turned out, I you'll be surprised to hear I lived.
Woohoo! And I had Jessica, my wife, off by my side, and I had just told her I was ready to have kids with her. And so it was a conscious choice. Oh, heck no, this is not that time. How did it change you?
Um, I saw it. I mean, it was actually great to see that I really was pretty unattached to most aspects of my life. I really felt like, it would be okay if that's how long I was supposed to be here. But I it also made my role as a mother more precious to me. And now he's 46. So I
Very,
did
very
good.
cool. Yes. So tell us about emptiness and Zen teacher and friend Norman Fisher.
Hmm. Um, well, we just did a reading together in Sausalito. He's so great. Any of you want to dip into Zen, but he's more than that category. Norman Fisher is brilliant, and he's also one of the people who has brought together meditative spirituality, uh, Buddhist practices with Jewish spirituality. And there have been a number of great teachers who worked on that, but he did this amazing translation, Zen translation of the Psalms, which I recommend to anybody. It's beautiful. Um, and so yeah, in the book, he talks about we were talking about emptiness. Um, he would say people just struggle with the idea of emptiness as a Buddhist concept, but really what we were talking about is uh, just letting go of attachment to things, so that there's like it's actually fullness and emptiness, very much the same, full of possibility, just a space
Richness.
out of which, yeah, richness, yeah, a space out of which, whatever is in the moment can flourish. And but he was when we talked the other day, he was so great. He said, in the book I talk about a friend of his who had died, and he says that, when his friend died, he realized one thing. What was it? That when you die, he said, and Norman is brilliant. When you die, you can't do anything anymore. I said, yeah, that's true, Norman. It was caught everybody's attention. Well, yeah, and so he said, and so when my friend died, I realized there were still things that he wanted to do in this world because he died young. And so first level was I started doing some of those things that he wasn't able to do. But then he said, I thought about the ways in which he did things. And I began to take into myself what that was, that part of him. And so it's like he's living in me because I've been doing certain things in the way that he would have done them. And I thought that was beautiful. And because we had talked a lot about how when our friends or family, close loved ones die, not just where do they go, but how can they still be alive for us? What's our relationship now with them? And, bringing them into us is a way to keep that. It's not just memory, but presence alive.
Thank you. Well, talking about snuggling up again and going back to Ram Dass, it sounds like he has been, the closer he gets to his passing on, it sounds like the more he has been snuggling up, in a sense, to Maharaji, who passed away many years ago.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, he really, I mean, and I feel this too, although we experience it slightly differently. But he will talk about how Maharaji is vividly alive for him, and um, and is the most important being in his life. And then he talked also about other dear friends who had died and how he holds them within himself so he doesn't feel their absence. Yeah.
What does it mean that the soul never dies?
Well, it does mean different things to different people, but the basic understanding that I think exists in most all religious and spiritual traditions is that there is an aspect of us which we can call the soul, the spirit, that is outside our mind and body, that continues in whatever form. Hinduism, Buddhism, of course, believe in reincarnation, so that spirit or soul reincarnates another time. Others believe that the spirit or the soul, goes to heaven or hell if you've been bad, and endures in other ways or becomes part of nature or the great spirit energy of the universe. It's just that part of ourselves that we know to be eternal, to be unaffected by the ups and downs and comings and goings of the rest of our life.
So Ram Dass talks about his first experience, I guess, with Tim Leary and Newton with Sandoz psilocybin, and how he was able to see layer after layer of his identification start to fall away.
Yeah, that experience from psychedelics is, of course, a common one, and now they're beginning to be able to do clinical trials again with psychedelics at NYU and Johns Hopkins and so on to help people with dying, with addiction, and other fears. And the way that happens, he describes beautifully, is that you begin to see from another. It's hard to talk about, from another place, and that you're not this role of being a podcast doer, or a
I've
writer,
had
or
ayahuasca journeys with shaman and seen these giant teeth come down and basically start to dismember me, at which case I went to love and said, I don't need to go through that. I'm just coming from a place of love. But I was stripped of identity,
yeah,
stripped of the meanness, and shown the infinite meanness that exists, not meanness, meanness
yeah,
that
yeah,
exists without a label.
yes. And that's just what he describes. Were they just teeth, or were they attached to something?
In this case, there was this giant burning flame of all different things happened at different points. Giant burning flame behind. It was like this metal machine. I'm on a conveyor belt heading down, and there is these giant teeth that are going to dismember me and just shred me into billions of molecules, which happened later in the in maybe that or another journey without the teeth even being necessary.
Yeah, the teeth aren't necessary. And actually, the ayahuasca isn't necessary either, although I must say that for many people, it's been really helpful. Um, but it's just that letting go of who we think we are,
Yes.
that we are so much, we're more, that letting go of who we think we are and holding on to allows us to be identified with that part of ourselves that is, you know, t- not limited by time or space, by lifetime, by any of it. And just being able to recognize and be able to rest in that, and you can call it awareness or your soul, that everybody knows there is, then it's there. There's a part of themselves that is not limited to this body and mind. And um, if you haven't, people experience it through, like trauma or shock. Sometimes, you're almost hit by a car, but you're not. And then all of a sudden, everything is just becomes really clear, and you get that. But it's also, you can also discover it if it's not already present for you through various meditation practices. Um, and other contemplative practices besides meditation. And sometimes people experience it just walking quietly in the woods. There are so many ways. Um, but once we know that we're more than these roles we play, it's so freeing. You can be the best you can be at being a podcaster, but if that
It's
fell
just a
away,
hat.
you 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 know you'd be fine.
Going back to me on the conveyor belt and saying that I went to a place of love at that point.
Hmm.
You talk about, and it's an important theme in the book, the antidote to fear being love.
Well, love, I think there are different ways to think about love, but it can also be identified with awareness or the soul. That the quality of that energy is loving. It's loving because it's connected to everything else in the universe. It's one with everything. And so it's not even loving something, it's being love. And that feels really good.
I'm so I want to go to these words: connected to and one with, and being love, at a time where we are set up as part of this beautiful school, as I see it. We are set up to feel separate than, different than, better than, or that person is this, I am that. But there's really an interconnection and a non-separateness to everyone and everything, isn't there?
Yes. There is. And many people have experienced it with other people.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes that happens like through sex. Sometimes it just happens through recognizing in another person's eyes that, wow, here we are. And, here we are together and there's no separation between us. Um, yeah,
I think recognizing that if we can start to lean in, snuggle up with, have the experience, talk about, learn about, feel into, that a lot of the challenges that we have in life, and we can see it, I think, most clearly when we start to look at death, is like trying to lop one hand off to take care of the other. It changes everything.
yeah, yeah. Well, it has profound implications for how we live in the world. And all we need to do is open our eyes and see it's there's a huge need for it right now.
Yeah.
So we have, depending on what motivates you, the relief of suffering is the world is crying out now for us to recognize this, to recognize that otherness is a construction of the mind.
Yes.
And there are wonderful ways in which we're different from each other. And that's what creates this whole like diverse, rich, incredible universe we're all in together. But the ways and what it is that we share and the ways that we are connected with each other is also true. And we need to be able to hold both. And and out of that then comes, just action that's motivated by love, and when another is suffering, by compassion, which includes the desire to relieve the suffering of another. So, yeah, we need it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What advice do you believe Ram Dass would give, and would you give on how to die?
Well, he would say the secret to dying is the same as the secret to living, which is to come from love, lead a more loving a life as you can. That then when you die, you'll be ready. That that what makes it hard for people to die often are regrets about things they've done in their life that um, you know, uh, they've never healed with other people in some way, or or regrets that there are things that they haven't done.
Yeah.
So, like learning to let go of your expectations and just love what is, um, and um, and then you know forgiving other people, which also comes out of love, even if what the other person has done is terrible. It doesn't mean you approve of their action, but recognizing that they're a fellow human being just like me, that we all think whatever we do is going to make us happy, and it often makes other people unhappy. Um, to be able to forgive that that way of going through the world is what prepares you to die peacefully and well.
Thank you. And one of the things that Ram Dass mentions is, I say, without, we never know when the piano, I don't know where this came from, maybe cartoon or something. We never know when the piano is going to fall on us. So
Okay.
you can
I like
picture it.
that.
You're walking
No,
through
I
New
like
York
it.
City, the
Yeah.
pulley and everything.
Yeah, yeah. Now there's one right next to me in this room and it's very heavy. Okay.
And make, who knows what the chord would be. But anyway, so if you have something important to say, because
Yeah.
we never know.
Yes.
Say
Yes.
it now. And when you exit the door, when you go to me, when you go to bed at night, make sure that you're doing so with all the words coming from the heart that need
Yeah.
to be said being said.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a tradition, and many spiritual traditions have a practice of last words, particularly
Yeah.
of great teachers, and there are books written about it, and lots passed on from the great teacher. So I asked Ramdas, um, did he had he thought about what his last words would be? Some Zen teachers do a poem at the end. Um, Ramdas kind of avoided the question and he said, if you have things that you want to say them now. Tell people, tell your friends that you love them. Tell your parents you love them. Tell your children. If you need to forgive now. Don't wait till the end. Gosh, I do have a friend who was adopted, and a generation or so ago, that was, parents didn't tell their children they were adopted. Seems really weird now, right?
Yeah.
But and this friend of mine, who's around my age, when her father's last words to her were, "You're adopted." She was already an adult and had no clue.
Wow, there's a piece it's sharing that just sounds to me like shattering. Your whole
Yes.
identity gets shattered.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in the long run, it's a good thing. In the long run, it's
Yeah.
always a good
Yeah.
thing. But in that moment, that's horrible for her.
Of course. And he must have needed to say it.
Yeah.
And couldn't do it until his last words. So, thing is to, do it now, like resolve difficulties, tell people you love them now. And of course, that's a good thing. That makes other people feel good. And um, uh, yeah, so
Which makes it lighter
let's
for
see.
you as well to live.
Yes, of course, of course. So
One paper keeping. What am I saying? What is the word for that right now? My cat has got my tongue. Paperwork item, I guess. Bookkeeping. There we go.
okay,
It's
paper
interesting. And I
keeping.
just
That's
I
good.
just wrote my accountant earlier today and saw him yesterday. I need to hire a paper keeper. Actually, I probably do. Wills. For so many of us listening to this show, we're going, well, I can take care of that tomorrow.
Mm. Well, tomorrow's not too bad as long as you do it tomorrow. But the idea is not to put it off.
Yeah.
And, we can put things off endlessly. Another good practice is at the end of the day or before you're going to sleep. I thought of this because you said before you go to sleep, is to do the gratitude practice of recognizing what during the last 24 hours you feel grateful for. And that will often bring to mind that, things, even, small things that you wouldn't think were that important. I tell in the book how one day after working on my sink, my plumber was leaving, and and I looked at him. I said bye and thanks a lot, and he gave me this big hug. And I said, "Well, that
Yay.
was great," because I love hugging people. That was great. He said, "Yeah, I thought I was going to die of cancer, and I didn't. And I made a resolution then that I would basically tell people who I appreciate and love that I love them because I had put it off. I thought there was plenty of time, and we never know. So doing the gratitude practice really helps you, first of all, appreciate your life. And even when it's really difficult, there's always something to be grateful for.
Yes.
And that makes you feel better about being here. And then, but it will also remind you of, things that would be good to appreciate, resolve, and so on.
When I part with somebody, even if it's a new person, actually, especially if it's a new person, if we've hit it off, if there's some I want to say love, but not love as in romantic love,
Mm-hmm.
but some connection there, I will quite frequently say, "Are you a hugger?"
Yeah, these days. That's a good question to ask.
And yes, you have to be careful about it, but I know
Yes.
anybody that I work with has to have a high huggability factor.
Yeah, right.
Just a hug. What is the mala ceremony?
We I just finished teaching a retreat with Ramdas in Maui. It's a retreat. This year, there were 375 people there, and it sold out. If that's the word. The registration closed after 5 or 8 minutes. I
Wow.
think it's the title. Open Your Heart in Paradise is the title.
It's a great
And
title.
it's in Maui. But and it was Ram Dass. Krishna Das does chanting every night. And then um, 3 Buddhist teachers, Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, and
Yep.
4, Jack Cornfield and Trudy Goodman, all taught practice. And so it's a week long. It's a great experience. And at the end of the week, uh, everyone has an opportunity to thank Ramdas, just come up and see him for a minute, and he gives everybody a mala, which I don't have one on, but a mala is a little bracelet of beads. And oh, you've got one, good. And they exist in many traditions. So in the Buddhist tradition, um, Buddhists will often chant Om Mani Padme Hum, just evoking the Buddha of compassion. Or and in Hinduism, I mean, Ramdas does Ram, the name of God. Ram, 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 Ram. There are many things you can do, but in Christian uh, centering prayer, essentially Catholic Christian centering prayer, Father Thomas Keating and others developed. You can choose a word, a Christian, familiar word like love or peace or hope or Jesus. And there was someone sitting right in front of me at this. I was explaining the mala ceremony to people who were there, and he had come from Greece, and I remembered that when I was in Greece, we used to call those worry beads. It was the same thing, and in Greece they have their own mantras that they use for them. So it's just a way of keeping you present in the moment, and uh, not just present, but in the presence of the Lord, of the soul, the spirit. Right. Oh, good,
This is in my
great, thank
hand
you.
while we're talking, and I'm going, and I'm not focused on it. It actually brings me more focus to you. But as I'm
Yes,
circulating and staying with the breath, I'm saying, I send love. I send love.
that's great.
And it helps, I believe, us connect. It helps me connect on
Yes,
the inside and stay in that present place.
yeah. My husband's mother is in assisted living now, and her life's pretty simple. And she, on a little table next to her comfy chair, she keeps her rosary beads, and she does the rosary 5 times a day,
Beautiful.
and it's basically the same, it's prayers on the beads. So yeah, I don't know when it started. It's ancient China or somewhere, but it seems to be a human practice because it exists in all these different traditions. So we call it the mala ceremony. Ramadas gives everybody a mala from India, and they put a thread of Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji was famous for not owning anything. Part of his message was don't be attached to material things, and he famously just owned a blanket. And in the summer, it was this light white cotton. In the winter, uh, cold in that part of India in the winter, and he'd wrap up in this big plaid wool blanket. And so one of those blankets was left when he died. And so they've been taking threads of it and putting a little tiny piece, in Catholicism, we call that like a second class relic because he actually touched it,
Wow.
and then put that on each mala, and it's just a reminder. And so each person receives one, and then that person says thank you to Ram Dass and to Maharaji, and Krishna Das is chanting in the background with a
So beautiful.
fabulous band. This year we even had John Densmore. Some of you who are older may know that he was the drummer for the Doors, and I mean, one of the world's great drummers. He was there this year. He was really fabulous. And yeah, and so that's going on. And then each person saying thanks. And while we're on the hugging thing,
Yeah.
I usually toward the head of the line, we're trying to move people quickly because there's so many people, and Ram Dass has not that much energy. So I'm trying to move people quickly through the line. I'm there, and toward the beginning of the line, one person I knew pretty well was there and just gave me a big hug. And so I think what happened was the next person thought, oh, I guess that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
So
Contagion.
375 people later, I was completely physically exhausted, but really happy.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
On that
So that's
note,
the
then,
gala ceremony.
beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What one homework assignment, maybe it's hugging, what one homework assignment would you give people today to start leaning into life and death and truly live?
Spend some time each day doing whatever your contemplative practice is. You know, it's different. There's so many. If you go to, for years I ran an organization called the Center for Contemplative Mind.
Yeah.
And if you go to contemplativemind.org/tree, we interviewed hundreds of people across all the spiritual traditions and asked what their practices were. Mm-hmm. And then we organized them into a tree with branches. And there's so many possibilities. But whatever it is that you do to keep you, as we've been saying during this podcast, just in touch with that part of you that is spirit or soul or interconnection, love. Spending some time every day doing yoga or meditation or walking or whatever it is you do. And then as part of that, each day, just allow yourself for a few minutes to remember that you're going to die and just see how that is with you. What does that mean? Maybe there's somebody you're missing terribly. Maybe, you can bring that person closer in, welcome them into yourself so it's less about grieving and more about being together in a new way. Or whatever fears you have. But just bring that into your awareness as often as you can. It doesn't have to be a big deal. But, and then of course you can talk with your friends about it. I mean, for me and Ram Dass, intentionally, I mean, we're both involved in all this work all the time, but to intentionally say to each other, okay, we're going to go into this room now and drink some tea and think and talk about dying and what it is we know and what we don't know and what we're afraid of and what we're not. And so we just did that. And we didn't, we let anything else that wasn't relevant go. And we just shared with each other. It's a really great thing to do. There is a kind of, what would you say, a project movement now of people coming together around having dinner together, or there's another one about having tea and cake together and then just talking about dying. I put a lot of resources in the book. I can't remember the names now.
So on that note, where can people go then to find your beautiful book and to find out more?
Well, they can go to ramdass.org.
Mm-hmm.
It's all one word, obviously. Ram, RAMDASS.org. And it's for sale there. And of course, you can go to Amazon, who in the beginning named us put us at the number 2 in their movers and shakers list.
Wow, I love it.
It's not a big deal. It's just the biggest change in one day. And so from the day before it was published to the day after, because there were so many pre-orders,
Mhm.
we we got to move and shake per day. I thought, how great! I went back the next day, we were gone. But anyhow, with all its limitations, many people do order from Amazon, and it's there. And
Very
it's
good.
also available as a download and as a CD. Um, for those of you who are more many podcasters like to listen rather than read.
Mm.
But the book is beautiful. They really did a really wonderful job illustrating it, and so it's nice to hold in your hands or to give to somebody else.
I've got to ask, is the cover that I have behind me, because I got to
Yes,
read the PDF, is it that cover or
yes.
the other one? Okay.
No, the other one was an early thing. It's this cover. And, they designed it to evoke Be Here Now, which was Ram Dass's first book in 1970, which was uh, like people were so grateful to get at a time when nobody was integrating Western psychology and Eastern mysticism. And um, it sold 2 million copies. So, of course, they want to evoke it. So, but it's really beautifully done.
It is. And you guys have been on quite the journey together.
Yeah, yes, we certainly have.
So, Jessica, my wife, the producer, we were mentioning her earlier. She always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids.
Uh huh.
What advice would you give to parents and about helping their kids to understand about life and death?
That's a great question. And, as you know, we treated it a little in the book in that we were asking each other and the other folks who live in Ram Dass's house, when was their first memory of death? And for many kids, it's pets or beloved pets or grandparents. But what they all said was that even younger people there said that they death wasn't talked about much in the family. So when somebody died, especially the first one to die, they just didn't know what to do about it. I mean, back in the day, we were usually not even told people died, and they just disappeared. But
Uncle Tim went away.
yes, and there are a number of children's books about death for people who have a hard time talking about it. There's some wonderful books about it, but using the opportunity of a pet dying is a good time. We just had a beautiful funeral for our Samoyed who died, and she was 13, which is a good life for a Samoyed dog. And my granddaughter Dahlia wrote a little poem. Nadine is sweet. Nadine is kind. Nadine will have a great rewind. And then one of
I
her
like it.
friends came over we had a little funeral, and one of her friends came over and they set it to music. So they sang the song for Nadine. And so we used that opportunity to um, talk to them about, what what happens when you die. And I think the more that you make it part of life for children, the easier it will be as they grow up, for sure. Um, yeah, and they just creating opportunities for them to ask about it is good. And often a book will do that, or a movie. Isn't it that Bambi's mother dies? I think.
Probably so.
Anyhow,
It's been a few years.
um, that's why. But it's really important. And when they're little, it if if you have come to acceptance of death as a natural part of life, you'll transmit that to them, and they'll just accept it as the way things are.
You're reminding me, we were on book tour many, many years ago, Burlington, Vermont, and we had our two dogs with us. One who had on and off long-term cancer, but had been doing very well, and a woman who was a housekeeper there, who's Tibetan. She came up to us and she said, "Your dog is going to pass away soon, and please promise me you will let her go natural and you will be there with her to the end. And going through that experience with Pumpkin, who was literally trying to play with crickets on her last day, and she knew it was her last
Yeah,
day.
they know. Yeah.
She knew, and she still had this beaming grin, and she knew was such a profound teaching's not even strong enough of a word of what that experience was like.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yes.
This has been truly beautiful. I have just a few last wrap up questions here for you. First off, I can't resist. I keep saying, no, no, don't go there, but I can't resist. What's a soul pod?
The soul pod was this is Ram Dass's not just idea, but or belief, but Ram Dass talks about when you die,
Mhm.
the soul never dies. So what happens to it? Ram Dass understands that after death, you return to your soul pod, and your soul pod is that group of beings with whom you've been through many lifetimes. It's it's that they might be your blood family, but they might not be. You know that we've all had that experience of meeting someone for the first time, and or even over time it becomes clear that we know each other. We have been through a lot together. I know you, and so the soul pod is those beings who you've been through experience with in other lifetimes, and maybe this lifetime, the next lifetime, you're going to take new roles in relation to each other that would be totally different from. The Tibetans say that every being on this planet has been your mother at some time. So, and then, and also in the soul pod is the brightest light. He said in the soul pod is your guide, and that is for him. That will be Maharaji, and that person will help you. Um, I don't know the words to use, but it's kind of like look down and decide what life you want to live in your next incarnation that will help you work through the most karma and become the most awakened.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, before we go into a very brief meditation, and this has been so, so beautiful, and for everybody listening, I cannot think of a more important, but not just more important, with all the stories and with all the heart that in it. This book is one big hug. Um, a
That's
more
a great line.
beautiful book to read. Yes, you can quote me on that. This book is one big hug. On that note, Mirabai, any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with people?
Oh goodness, just be loving to yourself, be loving to the others in your life, and be compassionate when you see others hurting. Do what you can to help relieve that suffering.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Would you have time for a very brief meditation?
Sure, I'll do. Uh, I'll do the practice that we talk about in the book, um, and this is so simple. You can do this anytime by yourself. So just find yourself comfortable if you're sitting or standing or lying down. Just find yourself relaxed, and in as much as you can, bring your spine, your neck, and your head into alignment so that your energy is flowing gracefully. And then just letting go of thoughts, opinions for a couple of minutes as they rise in your mind, just letting them go. And bringing your attention and your awareness to your breath, taking a few deep breaths. Noticing your breaths. And then gently, silently resting as much as you can in your awareness. That part of you that's not doing anything but just noticing. And slowly and gently repeating, I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. Loving awareness. Loving awareness. Just resting in being, loving awareness. And then when you're ready, slowly opening your eyes, coming back.
Woohoo!
Thank you.
This has been so beautiful, Mirabai.
It's been fun for me.
For me as well, and so my guess is for others listening too. Cannot thank you enough, and I have to give you the biggest hug.
That's great. The e-hug.
I like it. So gotta crank it back up for the finish here. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get walking each other home, and begin leaning into love and death and a giant hug today. And shine bright.
Woohoo! Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Mirabai.
I really loved it. And I wish you good luck with your future podcast, but I can see that you're really good at it. So, yeah, may you continue to be. And love to your wife. So.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!